A lawsuit filed in 2024 quietly exposed something most vehicle owners already felt, but couldn't quite articulate. Thousands of truck owners discovered their paint was failing far earlier than expected, and the only solution offered to them came with a price tag that could rival the cost of a used car. $5,000, $6,000, in some cases much more. Not for structural damage, not for a collision. It's just for paint that had lost its integrity under sun and time. That alone would be frustrating. But step back and look at the larger system. Across the United States, full vehicle repainting ranges from modest four-figure jobs to premium finishes pushing into five figures. The refinishing industry generates tens of billions annually, and a surprising portion of that comes not from accidents but from fading, oxidation, and surface failure. In other words, decay is not an exception. It is a business model. Here is where it gets interesting. What if that chalky, lifeless paint isn't truly dead? What if the assumption that you must strip everything down and start over is built more on habit than necessity? Today's discussion traces a line from early 20th century chemistry to a simple, almost overlooked solution sitting on ordinary store shelves. By the end, you will not only understand the science, but you will also know how to apply it in real-world conditions. Let's understand what dead paint actually means in practical terms. When most people see oxidized paint, they assume the material itself has failed completely. That conclusion feels logical. The surface looks dull, uneven, almost powdery. But the reality is more precise. The failure is not total. It is structural at a microscopic level. Common over-the-counter solutions rely on abrasion and concealment. They remove a thin layer of damaged material while temporarily masking imperfections with fillers. The result looks impressive for a short period. The surface regains gloss, reflections sharpen, and it feels like a problem solved. Then exposure returns the surface to its previous state. Sunlight breaks down the temporary layer, rain washes it away, the cycle repeats. This is not due to malicious design. It is simply how those materials function. They are cosmetic by nature. They address the symptom, not the underlying structure. Over time, this creates a predictable path. Repeated short-term fixes followed by eventual acceptance of an expensive, permanent solution. The critical insight is this. Beneath that oxidized layer, the original material often remains largely intact. It is not gone, it is fractured. Let us trace the origins back to early polymer science. Understand how that matters. It is worth stepping into the early 1900s, when synthetic materials were still being defined. Chemists began exploring acrylic compounds, searching for stable alternatives to natural resins that were inconsistent and difficult to control. Through years of experimentation, researchers uncovered something fundamental about acrylic polymers. When properly formulated, they could form clear, durable surfaces that bonded at a molecular level. More importantly, when these materials were thinned into liquid form, they behaved in a way that would later prove extremely valuable. Instead of sitting on top of a surface, thin acrylic solutions could penetrate it. This discovery was not aimed at car paint. Automobiles were still evolving at the time. The focus was industrial coatings, adhesives, and transparent materials. But the principle remained universal. When a polymer surface develops microscopic fractures, a sufficiently thin liquid can flow into those spaces and reinforce them from within. That principle would sit quietly in scientific literature for decades, largely unnoticed outside specialized industries. Why did this knowledge never become common practice? At first glance, it seems strange that such a useful concept never became mainstream. The explanation is less dramatic than people expect. It comes down to incentives. Industries that maintain long-term assets, such as rail systems or industrial equipment operators, prioritize extending material lifespan. For them, restoration is financially beneficial. Every extra year of usable life translates directly into savings. Consumer vehicle markets operate differently. Manufacturing emphasizes speed, scalability, and turnover. Maintenance ecosystems developed around replacement rather than restoration. Over time, repainting became the standard solution because it aligned with the structure of the industry. It is reliable, profitable, and widely understood. A low-cost method that restores existing surfaces does not fit neatly into that system. It generates minimal revenue. It does not require specialized infrastructure. There is little incentive to promote it on a large scale. As a result, the knowledge remained fragmented, surfacing only in communities that worked closely with materials on a small scale. How hobbyists uncovered what industry overlooked. In workshops and hobby rooms around the world, model builders encountered a similar problem on a much smaller scale. Transparent plastic parts, especially aircraft canopies, would become scratched and cloudy over time. Traditional polishing methods helped, but only to a point. Then a simple observation changed everything. A common acrylic-based floor finish, designed for household use, produced a remarkable effect when applied to these damaged surfaces. Instead of merely coating the plastic, it flowed into microscopic imperfections and restored clarity. The transformation was not temporary. It held up under handling, light exposure, and time. Word spread quickly through the community. What began as a curious experiment became standard practice. The connection is straightforward. The same type of polymer degradation that affects a small plastic canopy also affects a vehicle's clear coat. The scale differs, but the underlying chemistry does not. Let us examine the process at the molecular level. To understand why this works, it helps to break it down without oversimplification. A vehicle's clear coat is a polymer network designed to protect the color beneath it while maintaining optical clarity. Over time, ultraviolet radiation breaks bonds within that network. This creates tiny voids and channels. These microscopic defects scatter light. Instead of reflecting cleanly, light diffuses in multiple directions. That is what produces the dull, chalky appearance. A thin acrylic solution behaves differently from thicker coatings. Its low viscosity allows it to enter those microscopic channels through capillary action. As the carrier evaporates, the remaining material hardens and reconnects the structure internally. There is also an optical component. The new material closely matches the original refractive properties of the clear coat. By filling the voids, it restores the path of light through the surface. The result is a return to depth and gloss, not because a new layer was added on top, but because the existing structure was stabilized. How do we apply this knowledge in real-world conditions? Execution matters. The difference between a lasting result and a disappointing one often comes down to preparation. The first step is removing everything that interferes with bonding. Residual wax, oils, and contaminants prevent proper penetration. A thorough cleaning using a strong degreaser ensures the surface is ready. Next comes controlled removal of the most degraded material. This is not about aggressive sanding. It's about eliminating the weakest layer so the restoration can reach stable material beneath. Done correctly, this step improves both adhesion and final appearance. Application itself requires restraint. The solution should be applied in thin, even passes. Excess material leads to uneven curing and visual defects. Multiple light coats allow gradual buildup and consistent results. As the layers accumulate, the change becomes visible, depth returns, reflections sharpen. What looked permanently damaged begins to resemble its original state. So what are the limits of the method? There is a tendency to treat discoveries like this as universal solutions. That would be a mistake. This approach has clear boundaries. If the paint has physically separated from the surface, exposing primer or bare metal, restoration is no longer viable. At that point, the structure is compromised beyond surface repair. Professional refinishing is the correct path. Even under ideal conditions, this method does not replicate the durability of factory-applied or professionally baked coatings. Heat, environmental exposure, and time will eventually affect the restored surface. Maintenance may be required after a few years depending on conditions. Understanding these limits does not diminish the value of the technique. It clarifies where it fits. What does this reveal about knowledge and survival mindset? This is not just about vehicle maintenance. It reflects a broader principle that applies across survival, history, and practical living. Useful knowledge often exists outside mainstream channels. It's not because it is hidden, but because it does not align with dominant economic structures. Skills and techniques that empower individuals without generating large-scale profit tend to spread slowly, carried by communities rather than institutions. History is full of similar examples. Methods that extend lifespan, reduce dependency, or improve efficiency frequently emerge at the margins before gaining recognition. For those who pay attention, these moments offer an advantage. In conclusion, this is the lesson behind the technique. What started as a costly problem leads to a larger realization. System built around replacement can obscure opportunities for restoration. The assumption that failure requires starting over is not always accurate. A century-old understanding of polymer behavior, combined with practical experimentation from unlikely sources, provides an alternative. It's not a miracle solution, but a highly effective tool when used correctly. The next time you see faded, oxidized paint, consider what is actually happening beneath the surface. The material may not be gone, may simply be waiting for the right approach to bring it back. That is the mindset that separates passive consumption from active problem solving. The willingness to question assumptions, trace knowledge to its origins, and apply it with precision. If you found value in this breakdown and want more deep dives into overlooked techniques, historical insights, and real-world survival knowledge, subscribe to The Intelligent Channel and share this with someone who still believes every problem needs an expensive solution.